of Shurima, where the wind sings across dunes like an ancient lullaby, there was once a girl who could move the earth itself. Her name was Taliyah, though when her story begins, she's not a hero, not a master, not a legend. She's simply a child afraid of her own power. Taliyah was born to a nomadic tribe that crossed Shurima's deserts with patience and wisdom. Her people respected the land. They never conquered it. They traveled with it. The desert was alive to them, breathing beneath their feet. And for Taliyah, that was more than a metaphor. She could feel it. Even as a little girl, she sensed the tremble beneath the sand, the subtle shifting of rock deep below the surface. At first, it felt like a secret only she knew. Then it became something she couldn't control. It started small, a pebble hopping when she laughed, sand spiraling when she spun in excitement. But one day, when fear gripped her heart, the ground answered. The earth rose violently, shards of stone bursting upward in a wild, uncontrolled wave. No one died, but they could have. And that was enough. Her tribe looked at her differently after that, not with hatred. Not with cruelty, but with worry. Power like that was not natural, not safe. And Taliyah, barely more than a child, realized something terrifying. The earth was listening to her emotions. Afraid of hurting the people she loved, she made a painful choice. She would leave. Better to wander alone than become a danger to her family. So she stepped into the desert with nothing but determination and guilt weighing on her heart. She traveled north, far from Shurima's warm sands, searching for someone, anyone, who could teach her control. Her journey took her into the cold and fractured lands of Ionia, a place unlike anything she had ever known. Ionia was vibrant, spiritual, alive in a different way. The land there didn't just endure, it harmonized. And in that harmony, Taliyah found someone unexpected, Yasuo. Yasuo was a swordsman haunted by his past, a wanderer carrying guilt as heavy as Taliyah's own. He understood what it meant to lose control. He understood regret. When he saw the young girl struggling to hold back the rumbling beneath her feet, he saw something familiar. And so, in his own quiet way, he became her teacher. But Yasuo did not teach her to silence the earth. He taught her to listen to it. He showed her that power was not an enemy. Emotion was not weakness. The wind did not fight the sky. It moved with it. And so Taliyah learned to breathe before the stone rose, to guide instead of command, to shape instead of shatter. For the first time, the earth responded not with chaos, but with grace. Yet peace never lasts long in Runeterra. War came to Ionia. The empire of Noxus invaded, bringing steel and fire. Taliyah saw villages burn. She saw the cost of ambition. And in the tremors of battle, her power surged again. She could have unleashed devastation. She could have buried armies. But she remembered her fear in Shurima. She remembered the faces of her tribe. power without control destroys everything, including the wielder. So she fought carefully, defensively. She protected, she shielded. She refused to become a weapon of blind destruction. And when the fighting subsided, she felt the pull of home stronger than ever before. Shurima called to her, not as a frightened child, but as something else, as a guardian. When Taliyah returned to Shurima, she found it changed. Ancient forces were awakening. The empire long buried beneath sand was rising again under the ascended emperor, Azir. The desert was no longer quiet. It was shifting with destiny. And among the shifting sands, another presence moved. Zirath, a being of arcane energy and catastrophic ambition. Where Azir represented rebirth, Zirath represented ruin. Taliyah was no emperor. She had no grand destiny carved in prophecy, but she understood something both ascended beings often forgot. The desert belonged to its people, the tribes, the wanderers, the families who survived by respecting the land. When Zirath's power threatened to annihilate entire settlements, Taliyah stood between devastation and the innocent, not because she was the strongest, but because she knew what it meant to fear your own strength. Her mastery had grown. She could surf across shifting stone like a wave. She could raise walls that cut across battlefields. She could fracture the earth beneath enemies with precision instead of panic. But what made her powerful was not her magic. It was her restraint. There is a difference between moving a mountain and choosing not to. Over time, stories spread across Shurima of a young woman riding rivers of stone across the dunes, of walls rising to shield caravans from raiders, of earthquakes that never harmed the innocent. The Stoneweaver, they called her, not destroyer, not conqueror. Weaver, one who shapes carefully, one who understands that even the smallest stone matters. And yet, Taliyah never saw herself as a legend. She still worried, still doubted, still felt the tremor of fear when her emotions swelled too high. But now, instead of running from it, she grounded herself, literally. She pressed her hands to the earth and listened. The desert was not angry. It was patient. It had endured empires rising and falling. It had swallowed gods. It could handle her doubt. What makes Taliyah's story powerful is not that she can split the earth. It is that she chooses when not to. In a world filled with beings chasing domination, darkened warriors, ascended god kings, void-born horrors, Taliyah represents something different. Responsibility, growth, the courage to leave home to protect it, the humility to seek a teacher, the strength to And somewhere in Shurima tonight, if you listen closely, you might hear a low rumble beneath the sand. Not destruction, not chaos, just movement, controlled, confident. A young woman riding a crest of stone beneath the desert moon, guiding the land instead of fighting it. She is no longer the frightened girl who shattered dunes by accident. She is no longer running from her power. She is Taliyah, the Stoneweaver, and the earth answers her, not because she commands it, but because she understands it. In the far reaches of Shurima, where the sun burns so fiercely that even the horizon seems to melt, there are places the maps do not mark, places where caravans avoid, and even the boldest nomads lower their voices. It was toward one of these forgotten stretches that Taliyah traveled alone, riding a smooth current of stone that rippled beneath her feet like a silent wave. She had learned long ago that when the earth felt restless, it was wiser to listen than to ignore it. And for weeks now, a subtle unease had followed her steps. A tremor too steady to be random, too deliberate to be natural. The desert was trying to tell her something. As she crossed the dunes, she thought of how far she had come from the frightened girl who once fled her tribe, terrified of the damage her uncontrolled power might cause. Back then, every surge of emotion had cracked the ground open. Now the stone responded like an old friend, shifting at the slightest suggestion of her will, but never overpowering her. The difference was not strength, it was trust. The tremor led her to a half-buried city, swallowed by centuries of sandstorms, its sandstone towers jutting like broken teeth from the desert floor. Ancient Shuriman symbols lined the crumbling archways, their meanings worn thin by time, but not entirely erased. Taliyah slid down from her moving crest of rock and pressed her palm gently against the nearest pillar. Beneath the surface, she felt layers of history compacted together, echoes of ambition, of faith in the long-fallen sun disk, of pride that once rivaled the heavens. She thought briefly of Asir, the reborn emperor striving to restore what had been lost, and wondered whether revival always required reopening wounds. The earth beneath this city did not feel proud. It felt strained. Without warning, the ground buckled. A circular depression formed in the plaza at the city's center, sand cascading inward as though draining into an unseen abyss. Taliyah reacted instantly, raising a curved wall to halt the slide before the entire ruin collapsed into itself. She could feel it clearly now, a cavity below, vast and hollow. Something excavating upward from beneath, not void corruption like she had once sealed away. This was deliberate, mechanical, almost surgical in its precision. Stone blocks shifted from below, repurposed and rearranged. Whoever or whatever was down, there was not destroying the city. It was dismantling it. She drew a slow breath and let herself sink through the surface, parting the rock in a controlled descent rather than blasting her way through. The underground chamber she entered was enormous, lit faintly by glowing mineral veins running along the walls. At its center stood a figure armored in ornate gold and crimson, fragments of ancient stone orbiting him in a controlled gravitational dance. His presence pressed heavily against the air itself. It was not arcane chaos like Zarath, nor was it gentle. It was commanding, ascended, calculated. "You feel it too," the figure said without turning. His voice reverberated as though spoken through the stone itself. Taliyah recognized him from scattered descriptions whispered among tribes and traders. Skarner had once been tied to crystal song, but this presence was different, reshaped by the modern Shurima mythos. No, this was another ascended guardian reawakened by Azir's return, one of the Empire's ancient protectors long entombed. His name mattered less than the weight of his purpose. He was excavating something sealed beneath the city, something he believed vital to Shurima's restoration. "You're destabilizing the foundation," Taliyah replied evenly, her bare feet hovering inches above the ground as she let small stones orbit her in response. "If you pull that relic free without reinforcing the fault lines, the entire plateau will fracture. There are tribes who travel above this place, families. The Empire must be made whole," he answered, finally turning. His eyes glowed with solar intensity. "Sacrifices are inevitable." Those words struck her harder than any physical blow. She had heard that logic before, in war-torn villages, in invaders justifying conquest, in frightened versions of herself who once believed running away was the only solution. The earth vibrated with rising tension as the Ascended resumed drawing a massive disc-shaped relic upward from its stone prison. Taliyah could see the cracks forming already, spidering outward toward the city's perimeter. She could have attacked him. She could have slammed pillars into his armored form, triggered a quake strong enough to interrupt the excavation. But fighting an ascended being in an unstable cavern would guarantee collapse. Instead, she did what she had learned to do best. She listened. Beneath the relic, beneath the Ascended's power, beneath centuries of burial, the bedrock still held integrity. It was not weak, it was simply unsupported. While he focused upward, she focused outward. With delicate precision, she wove columns of reinforced stone along the chamber's perimeter, fusing loose sediment into hardened buttresses. She redirected pressure pass away from critical fracture points. Sweat beaded on her brow as she calculated each movement by feel alone. The Ascended noticed too late. "What are you doing?" he demanded as the relic finally tore free, hovering in the air between them. "Saving your empire," she answered quietly. Instead of the catastrophic collapse he expected, the chamber stabilized. The city above trembled but did not fall. Sand cascaded from rooftops, but the streets remained intact. The Ascended studied the reinforced walls, realization dawning that she'd prevented disaster, not by opposing him, but by compensating for him. "You risked much," he said after a long silence. "So did you," she replied. "The difference is I accounted for the cost." For a moment, the tension eased. The relic glowed steadily, no longer pulling violently against its surroundings. The Ascended inclined his head slightly, not submission, but acknowledgement. "Shurima needs strength," he said. "It also needs people left alive to stand in it," Taliyah answered. When she emerged back into the sunlight, the city still stood against the blazing sky. Cracks marked the plaza, but they were superficial, scars rather than fatal wounds. The Ascended departed soon after, carrying the relic towards the Imperial Heartlands. Whether he would remember her lesson, she did not know. Empires often struggled to learn restraint, but she had proven something important, not just to him, but to herself. She did not need to choose between opposing power and submitting to it. She could reshape the consequences. As evening fell, Taliyah rode once more across the dunes, the stone crest beneath her steady and smooth. She thought about how easily the day could have ended in ruin. Once, fear would have driven her to extremes. Anger would have triggered devastation. Now, control felt less like suppression and more like harmony. The desert wind swept past her, carrying grains of sand that glittered in the dying light. Somewhere far off, caravans moved safely along their routes, unaware how close the ground beneath them had come to giving way. That anonymity did not trouble her. She did not need monuments or proclamations. The earth itself was witness enough. Every stabilized fault line, every redirected tremor, every village spared